Hello everyone, and welcome to the lecture on class attributes. In this lecture, we look at class attributes in detail. If I go to the previous class that we created, in this person class, we saw that this address is a class attribute. So this class attributes, they are shared by all instances of our class. Right? So all our methods are able to use and refer this class attribute. These attributes that we defined in our init special method are called, those are instance attributes, and they are added to the instance when the init method is executed. Right? Now let's look at class attributes in detail and how we can use them. Let's create a person class. Class then person. Let's define a class attribute known as, let's say, majors. And then we'll pass a tuple of majors. Let's say engineering. Let's pass few more majors. Law. Let's say IT. And psychology. So that's our class attribute, and then let's define a few methods. So the first method is our special init method. Init, it takes self as its first attribute. Then let's pass some more attributes like major, name or first name, and let's pass last name. Okay, then let's initialize this attributes. Can say self that major. We'll set it to be equal to major. Then self that name. We'll set it to be equal to name. Self that last name. We'll set it to be equal to last name. So now that we have initialized our instance attributes, what we want to do is, once we initialize our person object instance, we'll pass a major and then see if that major is in our list. And if it's not in our list, we'll pass an error. So what I will do is I'll include an if statement to accomplish that. We can say if major is not in our self that majors, we can raise an error. We can simply raise, let's say, a value error. So I'm saying value error because I know the specific type of error that this will raise. That's why I said value errors. This is one kind of error. Then we'll simply say, let's format our error. So we'll say we have our open parenthesis, and then we can say is not a valid major. Okay, that format, and then we'll pass major. So we'll pass a major, and then this will check if the passed major is within this tuple, and if it's not in here, it will raise a value error. If not, it will continue with our method and then do whatever our method is doing. Okay. Next, let's define another method. Define, let's say, person major. Then we'll pass self as its attribute. And what this method will do is, let's simply print the major of that person. So what we'll do is print the major of plus self dot name plus space plus self dot last name plus is plus self dot major. Okay, what this person major method will do is it will print out the major of that person. Next, let's initialize an instance of our person class. Then we'll save it in a variable called, let's say, Jimmy. Then we'll set it to be equal to person, and then we'll pass, so it takes 3 attributes, it takes 4 attributes, let's pass those. Major, let's pass low, and then for first name, let's simply pass Jimmy, and for last name, let's pass Newman. Okay. Then next, if we say Jimmy dot and then hit tab, we'll see the list of available methods and instances that we have for our attributes. So we have majors, last name, major, name, and person major. Let's look at the first one, major. So that will print out a tuple of these majors. So we have engineering, law, IT, and psychology. Jimmy.tab. Then if we choose last name, we see that last name is Newman, so we'll get Newman. And then Jimmy dot. So this time, let's select major. That will be low. And then Jimmy dot tab, and we'll choose this method, person major, and then we'll include a parenthesis for that major. So that printed out the following statement: the major of Jimmy Newman is low. That's what we wanted. Okay, let's put some space here. Run it again. So the major of Jimmy Newman is low. Since low is in our tuple here, we did not get any value error, right? Similarly, if we pass some other major like psychology and run it, we'll still not get any error since that's a valid major. The major of Jimmy Newman is psychology. What if we put some other major that doesn't exist in our majors class attribute here? What do you think we'll get? Yes, we'll get a value error. Okay, for instance, if we put, let's say, math and run it, we get a value error, right? Let's see here, we got a key error. What went? Okay, oh, so here there shouldn't be any space. Okay, let's run it again. Okay, we have a value error, and it says value error, math is not a valid measure. Similarly, if we put some other measure, like let's say physics, and run it, we'll get the same value error. It says value error, physics is not a valid measure. Okay, whereas we saw that if we put one of the measures from our measures class attribute, let's say engineering, it's valid, and then the measure of Jimmy Newman is, let's run this again, is engineering. So that's a valid entry. Great. Now let's look at another example. So we'll create another class called person, and then let's have a class attribute named sports, and then we'll set it to be equal to an empty list. And what we'll do next is, what we will do to this is that we'll add some sports, we'll append some sports to this empty list. Let's define a couple of functions. Our first function, of course, is the special init function, and then we'll pass self as an attribute. Then we'll say self.sports, we'll set it to be equal to an empty list. And let's define one more method, and let's call this method add sport. It will take self and then sport as attributes, and let's initialize those attributes. So we can say self.sports.append, and then we'll pass sport. So what this method will do is it will append a sport to our sports list. And let's also have it print some message. Let's say the following sport has been added to our, let's say, sports list. Then plus sport. Okay, that looks good. So in this case, sports is our class attribute, and it's an empty list. Now let's initialize our person class. Then let's save it in a variable called x is equal to person. And then, so our person class takes only one attribute, which is self, right? So that's all we have to do, person. Now if we say x.hit tab, we'll see we have the following methods and attributes available for us. Add sport is the method that we define here, and then sports is the empty list that we created, which is the class attribute. So right now if we say x.sports, we'll only get an empty list, right? Okay. And if we say x.add sport, and we know that the add sport method takes two attributes. One is self and the second one is sport. So let's add a sport. Let's say soccer, and then run it. So we got the message, the following sport has been added to our sports list. Okay, soccer. Now if we call this sports attribute, class attribute, x.sports, we'll see that it's no longer empty. It has it has soccer now. Similarly, if we add an additional sport, let's say x dot add sport, and let's say basketball, then run it, the following sport has been added to our sports list. Now if we call our sports attribute, we see that basketball is added. So now we have soccer and basketball. Okay, so this is how we can use class attributes. Great. What we'll do next is add one more method in our class and then show you more example of this class attribute. Let's add our function. Let's add our method. Define. Let's name it sport list. Sport list will accept self as its attribute. Then we'll simply print the following, or we can say here is a list of all the sports in our list, plus, and then we'll pass self dot sports. Okay, we can do that, but there is one issue with this print statement. Here we have a string and this is a list. So self.sports is a list, and we're trying to concatenate a string and a list. That will give us an error because we cannot concatenate two different data types. So in that case, we'll convert our list into a string by casting it. So we'll say string self.sports. So that will convert it into a string. Now we can initialize our person class. So we can create an instance of our person class and save it in a variable called x equal to person, and then it takes only self as its attribute. So we can say x is equal to person, and then now if we say x dot hit tab, those are the available methods that we have, methods and attributes. So let's first add a couple of sports. So x dot add sport, let's add soccer. The following sport has been added to our sports list, soccer. Let's add basketball. Okay, the following sport has been added to our, and then let's add one more sport. Let's add baseball. Okay, baseball has been added. Now if we say x dot sports, we'll get a list containing the three sports, right? Soccer, basketball, and baseball. Now let's call this sport list method. When we call this method, we'll get, here is a list of all the sports in our list, and then we'll get a list containing these three sports. Let's do that. So x dot tab, our method name is sport list. Don't forget the parentheses, then run it. So we have, here is a list of all the sports in our list: soccer, basketball, and baseball. Great. So this is what I have for this lecture. Just to summarize, we looked at class attributes and how we can use them in our class. And we mentioned that these class attributes are accessible to all our methods within our class. Great. Thank you, everyone.